Howdy, my name is Nonat, and welcome to another installment of the Pathfinder Spellbook. So if you're new, the Pathfinder Spellbook is a weekly video where I discuss spells from the Pathfinder game system. We go over what they do, I give my personal thoughts on them, and a final opinion on how good I think the spell is overall. Now going forward, starting with this video, the format is going to change slightly. In the first few videos I did cantrips and then focus spells, and the more I've looked into it for videos for the future, the more I see that spells do overlap a lot between the classes. Most spells aren't stuck in one single tradition of magic. Most spells will be arcane and divine, or primal and occult. So the format I was doing before, such as arcane cantrips and then divine cantrips, that's not really going to work. So instead I'm going to be covering all of the spells in alphabetical order, and when I mention each spell, I'll mention the traditions that can use that spell. So starting today, we're going to be doing first level spells A through G. We got a lot to cover, so let's get started. Starting off with Air Bubble, a really cool spell. Effectively, it just puts a bubble of air around a target's head as a reaction, so it's not even an action. If something happens that begins suffocating a target due to the environment, you can throw the bubble on and they will be able to breathe absolutely fine, absolutely normally for either 1 full minute or until they reach an area they can breathe again. My only issue with this spell is that it automatically ends the second they enter a breathable location. So if you're in the ocean and you're getting pulled underwater, but you get away and you're breaking the surface and you keep going down and up, under and over the water, and someone casts air bubble on you, you'll be able to breathe while you're underwater, but the second you break the surface, even if it's 2 seconds later, the spell will expire. There's no way around it. The rules as stated is the effect ends as soon as the target returns to an environment where it can breathe. So it's really situational. It's great for exploration. If there's a river and a cave or a lake you need to explore, it's really good for that. Mid-combat, and especially in like rapid waters, not quite as useful. I still really like it. 4 out of 5 stars. Really cool utility. Air Bubble is available for arcane, divine, and primal casters. Alarm is a really simple spell. Available for all spellcasters. You choose target object or area, and if anything enters it, an alarm goes off. You can trigger that alarm to be a physical sound that everything nearby can hear, or a mental sound that only you can hear when the alarm goes off. I like that they do put that if you or anyone around you are asleep when the sound goes off, you do need to roll a DC 15 perception check to actually wake up from the sound. There's also rulings that if you can roll a stealth check against the spell's DC, if perhaps the person knows the alarm spell is active, they can actually sneak through the alarm without triggering it, which I think is really cool. Being a low-level spell, it's nice that these non-magical means can still be used to get through it. Upon reaching 5th level, you can even set more specific criteria that only specific creatures will sound the alarm. So if non-humanoids or specifically humanoids cross the area, then the alarm sounds. Really good for when you're sleeping in a dangerous place in a dungeon. Really, really useful spell. 4 out of 5 stars. You can get a lot of creative uses out of this. Ant Hall is only useful if you use the bulk system, which technically you always should be. In our campaign, as a DM, I'm way too lenient, and I just trust that people aren't carrying too much stuff. And if they say, oh, I put the entire boar's body in my backpack, I'm like, okay, but no, you don't, though, because that's real heavy. So usually we just go off of logic, but if you are using the bulk system, for the arcane and primal traditions, Ant Hall increases the target's ability to carry 3 more bulk than normal. I'm not going to go into the whole bulk system, I'll probably cover that in a future guide at some point, but basically, you can carry more stuff. Simple as that. It lasts 8 hours for a single first level spell slot. That's pretty good. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5 stars just because it's a simple effect, but it's real good at what it does. Cast it on your caster or your fighter or whoever you need to carry more stuff. Dump everything in their backpack and get that loot out of that dungeon. Bane is an interesting spell. It's only available to divine and occult spellcasters, and it's sort of the opposite of Bless, which I'll get to next. For 2 actions, you put down a 5-foot area, so only 1 square on a grid, and any character in that square takes a -1 penalty to all attack rolls. You can make a will saving throw to not take the penalty and resist the Bane, And interestingly, every time it comes back to your turn, you can spend one action to concentrate and keep the spell going. And when you concentrate on the spell like this, you can increase it by 5 feet. So a 5-foot square of Bane on the next turn will increase to a 10-foot square of Bane, and then a 15-foot square of Bane. And this keeps growing as long as you control the spell. You can opt not to grow it and just leave it as it is, but effectively you can cover almost the entire battlefield, and it only affects enemies. So that is incredibly important. You basically want to cover the whole battlefield with this. It does not affect allies. It specifically says enemies in the area for the target. So this is great. You cast this at the start of a fight, and you spend your one action on each of the following turns just growing and growing the area so that it encompasses all of the enemies, and unless they save their versus the will save, that's a permanent -1 to all their attack rolls. That is pretty good. I'll give that a 3-star. It's nothing spectacular. The fact that they can save, completely negating it, and the fact that it's only a -1, it's a first level spell, so I'm a little forgiving for that. But pretty good. You know, if you're fighting 5 enemies and they're all taking -1s, that is a lot of potentially prevented damage. Bless is the complete opposite. You cast it on a 5-foot square. Each turn for one action, you can grow it 5 feet, and only allies in the area get a +1 to hit with this. Now, there's no will save. It's a guaranteed effect, which is really, really nice. And if, again, after 4 or 5 turns, if you're covering your entire party, that's a +1 to all attack rolls for your entire party. I personally think this is a little bit better than Bane, just because it can't fail and it's a guaranteed effect, whereas with Bane, you could potentially end up wasting the spell slot for no avail. Plus, with Bless, it's almost always useful because you have a multi-person party, whereas Bane is not quite as useful against single targets. So I'm gonna bump Bless up to a 4 out of 5 stars, just because I think that little edge over Bane is enough. Burning Hands. You want to do damage? Use Burning Hands. In a 15-foot cone in front of you, all targets take 2d6 fire damage and get a basic reflex save. Like I say every video, basic saves are just success, half damage, crit success, no damage, fail, full damage, crit fail, double damage. So you could do up to 4d6 with this. And you can heighten this spell to higher levels if you really want to, and each time it ups the damage by 2d6. So unlike a cantrip, this does not automatically heighten as you level up, so I'm going to be looking at it in its level 1 form, and it's pretty good, you know, 1 spell slot for 2d6 damage, that's higher than anything you're going to get from a cantrip, and it's an area, so you can hit multiple targets with this. Really good damage spell, 4 out of 5 stars. The only downside is the 15-foot range, but you should be able to make it work. Charm, a really good roleplay spell for the arcane, occult, and primal traditions, and still has some use in combat. Target creature makes a will save. If they succeed, nothing really happens and they know you tried something. If they crit succeed, nothing happens and they know you tried to charm them. So if you're trying to use this on like a shopkeeper and they crit succeed their save, they're probably kicking you out of their store. If they fail though, they become friendly towards you, and if they were already friendly and you charmed them, they become helpful and they are completely unable to take hostile actions against you, which means you cast this on a target that's attacking you, and it doesn't even say humanoid. You can cast this on a wild boar, and if it fails its will save, it will become friendly towards you and cannot take hostile actions. If it crit fails its saving throw, it will automatically become helpful, meaning it won't sacrifice its life for you, but it'll do what it can to make your life easier. So this is a really handy spell in a wide variety of situations, and most casters, aside from Primal, can use it, so watch out DMs, this one's going to make your life hell. 5 out of 5 stars. It's way too good. It's so good to just be able to be like, hey, you don't hate us anymore. The only balance is that if it was already hostile towards you and you've been fighting it, or it already just had a pure hatred of you, it does get a +4 to its will save, so it's a little less likely that an enemy will turn to ally, but it's still possible. Actually, double checking the words as written, as long as you and your allies have not threatened or harmed it, it doesn't get the bonus. So if this boar is rushing towards you and none of your allies have drawn weapons or attacked it in any way, and you cast this, it does not get the +4 to the will save. Keep that in mind, players. You can use that to your advantage. Oh, also, before we continue, I didn't mention at the beginning of the video, we're only covering things in the core rulebook. There's tons of bonus spells from Gods and Magic, and I'm sure there's going to be more from the Advanced Player's Guide. But just to keep this less than a 30-part series. We're just going to be going over level 1 through 9 and 10 spells in the core rulebook, because it's already going to take me months. Moving on to color spray for arcane and occult spellcasters. Super simple. You shoot out a 15-foot cone like Burning Hands of swirling colors, and depending on their will save, something happens. If they crit succeed, nothing happens. If they normally succeed, they're dazzled for 1 round. If they fail, heroes. They are stunned and blinded for 1 round, and they're dazzled for a full minute. And to remind people, dazzled means you have to make a DC 5 check to hit anything, not 10. Thank you, commenters, for pointing that out. And on a crit fail, they are stunned for 1 round and blinded for 1 minute. Blinded is basically an even more effective dazzled, and comes with a lot of extra benefits, such as being forced to always move half speed because all terrain is difficult terrain, automatically crit failing perception checks based off sight, and a -4 penalty to all other perception checks. It's a brutal condition, and they will be blinded for 1 minute on a crit fail. And the fact that a normal fail causes a stun, which makes them miss their next turn, as well as a list of other penalties, that's a 4 out of 5 star. Is that 5 star? Yeah, I'm going to give that a 5 star. As far as action economy goes, 2 actions to knock potentially more than 1 enemy out of the initiative order for the next round. That's incredible. That's a 5-star spell. I'm rating these really highly. Maybe it's because I'm still coming off of the focus spells from a few weeks ago, but these are some really good spells so far, guys. Command. Oh, command. If charm is every GM's worst nightmare, command is their personal hell. You shout a command that's hard to ignore. The creature makes a will save. If they succeed or crit succeed, nothing happens whatsoever. If they fail, for their first action on its next turn, they must do what you command. If they crit fail, they must use all 3 actions on their next turn to do as you command. So if you say, attack your friend, they have to attack their friend. If they're already in melee, they will use their first action to strike their friend. So not only are they potentially dealing damage to their friend, they're accruing a multiple attack penalty, and the rest of their turn is going to be a lot less effective. Granted, if you cast this on a melee enemy who is far away from their friend and they only normally fail, they'll spend their first action moving up to their friend, but then they get control again for the next 2 actions. If they crit fail, though, good lord, you are not only taking an enemy out of the initiative order for the opposing forces, but you're putting it back in as an extra ally for a full turn. That is effectively a 6 action economy bonus for your side, taking 3 away from the enemies and giving 3 to yourself. For 2 actions and a first level spell slot, that's incredible. 5 out of 5 stars. Think of it also more as a combat-focused charm. It only lasts for 1 round, so it's not completely game-breaking. Now, worth noting, I'm looking at most of these from a level 1 perspective, so even as a level 1 spell, 5 stars. If you look at this as a 5th level spell, which you can heighten commands to a 5th level spell, and cast it on 10 targets at once. I'm not going to talk about it too much, but you can think of the damage that'll deal. 10 potential enemy turns ripped out of their initiative. It's disgusting. Let's move on. Create water. Arcane, Divine, and Primal casters get this. I like the description. You cup your hands, and water flows out of it, and that's it. You can create up to 2 gallons of water with the 1 spell, and it lasts for 1 day before magically evaporating. It's probably the simplest spell in the game. You just summon water. It doesn't say pure water. I'm sure it's supposed to be implied that it's pure, drinkable water. But, yeah. There's not much to say. I guess 3... No, I have to give this one 2 stars. Now that it's not a cantrip or anything, I need to get a little bit harder. And the fact that it just makes water great in a survival situation could be cool to show off or impress someone. But for the most part, 2 gallons of water being summoned, it's cool. It's good. But it's a little more situational. 2 out of 5 stars. There is a bird chirping up a storm outside. I think I need to go close my window. 1 second. Okay, I'm not going to go too in-depth on this next one because it could be its whole video on its own. Detect alignment basically lets you know if there is something of a certain alignment around you. You pick lawful, chaotic, evil, or good, and the spell tells you yes or no, there are beings of that alignment around you. If you cast it as a 2nd level spell, you know exactly where the alignment is, who has that alignment, and how strong it is. There's a whole chart for what level the creature is, being how much aura they give off and all that. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5 stars. It's useful. It has its moments. You can find out if someone's evil, which is cool. And as a DM, I hate it. It is an uncommon spell, though, so I don't believe you can normally take this upon a level up. You would have to learn this via a scroll or being taught. Detect Poison for Divine and Primal casters. Weirdly, also an uncommon spell. I didn't think this would be too weird, too powerful that it wouldn't be able to be taken on a normal level up, but you detect whether a creature is venomous or poisonous. It almost works the same way as the previous spell where you detect if something is venomous or poisonous, but that's it. Yes, you get a yes or a no answer, and if you cast it at 2nd level, you learn how many different types of poisons are in the creature or object. You can work on a poisoned object, and what those poisons are. That's it. Again, I don't know why this is an uncommon spell, especially for a primal caster. You'd think Detect Poison would be a pretty easy thing for them to do, but I didn't write the book. Moving on. 3 out of 5 stars, I guess, same as Detect Alignment. Situational, but useful for what it does. Disrupting Weapons. Only Divine spellcasters get this one. You target up to 2 weapons, which must be wielded by an ally or unattended, and you infuse it with positive energy. Every time the weapon hits, it deals 1d4 damage only to undead. It deals positive damage, but it only works on undead. So I suppose this is the go-to spell if you're going to be fighting ghosts and incorporeal undead specifically, because it means your melee fighters can still hurt them. The martial classes are still effective. But other than that, that's it. An extra 1d4 positive damage against undead for 2 weapons. If you're fighting undead, this is a great spell. If you're not, it's useless. I'm not a fan of the 3rd and 5th level spell. Even casting it as a 5th level spell, which is a pretty pricey spell slot, you give up to 3 weapons, an additional 3d4. I guess if you think about that as an additional 9d4 damage every round, I guess it's decent 5th level spell slot at that point, because it lasts for 10 rounds. I'm gonna give it a 2 out of 5 stars strictly for being too situational. If it was a flat bonus 1d4 positive damage, I think that'd be cool. I don't know if that'd be overpowered. Who knows? But the fact that it's just against undead makes it a little too situational for me, and I'm not personally as much of a fan of spells that are only useful in specific situations. Fear, for if you don't have the Intimidate skill proficiency. Target makes a will save. Crit success. Nothing happens. Succeed. Frightened 1. Failure. Frightened 2. Crit failure. Frightened 3. And fleeing. That's it. And then if you cast it at 3rd level, it can target up to 5 creatures. It's literally the Intimidate action in spell form. The Demoralize action. It uses Intimidate. It's fine. It's available to all 4 traditions, so anybody can cast it. I'm not personally a fan. I would prefer to just intimidate people with my sheer power and charisma and strength, but if you like inflicting fear on your enemies, this is the one for you. 2 out of 5 stars because it already exists in a non-magical mean, and this doesn't do anything special aside from that. I think the crit failure is 1 frightened level higher than the Demoralize action, but there is a skill feat that makes Demoralize also cause fleeing. So yeah, this is pretty much just an upgraded Demoralize that costs a spell slot. Featherfall, classic. Everybody knows what this does. It lasts for 1 minute and can be cast as a reaction by arcane and primal spellcasters, but it can only be cast on a target that's falling, which is interesting. So you can't cast it on yourself and then jump, but instead of falling and quickly gaining speed, their speed slows down to 60 feet per round, so that's only 10 feet per second. A pretty slow, safe fall. If they reach the ground within the minute, they take no damage, and the spell ends as soon as the target lands. So no fancy casting Featherfall to jump across multiple jumps on a chasm, as you can only cast it while falling. So great for saving someone's life, pretty useless everywhere else. I'm going to give it a 2 out of 5 stars. It's just, if your character is falling, or someone within 60 feet of you is falling, it's great. Otherwise, it's pretty useless. I suppose if your party needs to escape down the side of a mountain, as long as you, the spellcaster, goes last, they can jump Featherfall, jump Featherfall, jump Featherfall, as long as you have enough spell slots, and then you can all get out safely. I don't know. Featherfall has always been boring to me. Just ride the freaking fall, man. I'm cutting that out. Fleet Step, only available to arcane and primal spellcasters, is really good. It lasts 1 minute, you can only cast it on yourself, and you gain a plus 30-foot bonus to your speed. In a game where average is 30, being able to spend 1 spell slot to give yourself double move speed for the entire encounter, because like I've said, most encounters don't go longer than 10 rounds, that's nuts. This is a spell you'd love to take if you make an archetype, and oh my word, I have ideas. I have ideas for an archetype. And here's where I plug my Patreon, because if you're interested, if you pledge to me on Patreon once a week on Thursdays, I upload character concept videos where I go through building fun, cool, stupid, hilarious character ideas using the Pathfinder 2e system. They're a lot of fun. I've gotten some good feedback for them. There's a link in the description if you're interested. Back to our content. Fleet Step is really, really good, especially for running. You might spend 2 actions casting it on yourself. On future rounds, you can move up to 180 feet in a round with 3 actions. That's insane. Hold on, what's the math on that? So I just took the world record mile in feet and divided it by the record in seconds, and then multiplied that by 6 to see how fast the world record mile sprint would move in a single round of combat. And the world record mile in 6 rounds of a Pathfinder 2e encounter would move 142 feet. In 1 round of combat. Just by casting Fleet Step, you are faster than the fastest man in the world. That's hilarious. Let's move on. 4 out of 5 stars. Floating Disc. If you don't want to cast Ant Bulk on yourself, or you have something that's just super awkward to carry, you cast Floating Disc. Arcane and Occult spellcasters cast this. It lasts 8 hours, and you make a 2-foot wide disc that can hold things. It can hold up to 5 bulk, so it's technically more efficient, as Ant Bulk only gives you +3 to what you can hold. This technically gives you +5, though it is following behind you. The spell does have a lot of weird triggers that end it, though. If anyone tries to climb on top of it, or lift it, or push it, it does just de-spell, so nobody can touch it, otherwise it really does sort of wear off. The weird part, though, is that it says it follows 5 feet behind you, but it wears off if you move more than 30 feet away from the disc. Now, there is no move speed here for the disc, so it's worth assuming the disc moves the same speed as you and just is always permanently 5 feet behind you. So the only way I could see you getting away from the disc is if you teleported or ascended somehow. The disc, while it can ride up slopes and such, is always floating just above the ground. So if you were to cast Fly and try to fly away from the ground, I suppose the disc wouldn't fly upwards, and the second you were more than 30 feet away, it would despawn. So there's some weird logic here. You'd sort of have to think it through. It's not too clear, but effectively, you make a disc. As long as you just walk with it, it's not going to despawn. Tell your barbarian you can't ride on it, and you're fine. 3 out of 5 stars. It does what it does. Honestly, between this and Ant Bulk, take your pick. If you prefer carrying your own things, use Ant Bulk. If you prefer having a fake disc do it for you, Floating Disc is your spell of choice. Oh, Goblin Pox is fun! Arcane and Primal spellcasters get this. A target creature makes a Fortitude save, which we haven't seen a lot of so far. If they crit succeed, they're fine. Even if they succeed their Fortitude save, they become Sickened 1, which pretty much gives them a -1 to all rolls on their next turn, I believe. If I'm wrong, there'll be text on the screen correcting me. If they fail, they become afflicted with Goblin Pox, which means that it's a type of disease where they're going to need to continually make saving throws every round to either resist it or get worse. On a failure, at stage 1 of Goblin Pox, they're Sickened 1, just like we saw with the success, but this gives the opportunity for them to get worse. If they crit fail, they're afflicted with Goblin Pox starting at stage 2, which sickens them 1, giving them -1 on all their rolls, and slowed 1, so they only get 2 actions per round. That's brutal. So even a failed save can potentially get all the way down to stage 2 of slowed 1. So that's already bonus action economy for your side of the fight. If they get to stage 3, they are Sickened 1, and they cannot reduce their Sickened value below 1. Weirdly enough, the slowed does disappear at stage 3. So they are only slowed during stage 2. But at this point, even if they cure their Goblin Pox, they are still Sickened 1 for 24 hours, and nothing they can do will reduce it. That's awesome. Well, except for curing the disease. Well, I don't even know if curing the disease would do it, because the effect is sickened 1, and the creature can't reduce its sickened value below 1 for 1 day. It doesn't tell me how long Goblin Pox lasts. Maybe it's in the core rulebook. I'm just looking at the spell right now itself. But it's a pretty brutal spell, you know? They're minor things. But if you just want to make someone feel awful or even affect the action economy of combat, it's a really fun way to do it. To make somebody sick mid-combat is a lot of fun. I'm giving that a 4 out of 5 stars just for the flavor. Grease, another really fun spell. Level 1 spells are really fun, guys. Arcane and Primal Casters get this. You have a range of 30 feet and can either target a specific object or 4 separate 5-foot squares. So starting off, the target is pretty simple. You choose a target, that target becomes greasy. If you cast it on an object, the creature holding that object has to make a reflex saving throw. On a success or a crit success, nothing happens. But if they fail, then they take a -2 penalty to basically any kind of check involving that weapon, usually attack rolls. If they crit fail, they completely drop their weapon, the GM decides where it lands, and they have to pick it back up. So it's a decent, fun spell to mess with somebody. On the floor, however, 4 different 5-foot squares of grease on the floor has to immediately make a reflex save or an acrobatics check, or they fall prone. The same goes for anybody moving onto or through the greasy square. They must make that save to avoid falling prone. The characters can crawl or use the step action to make their way carefully through the grease if they want to, so as not to fall prone. It's silly, it's fun. I don't know exactly how useful it is as far as a level 1 spell goes, but I enjoy it. I'm gonna give it a 3-star. I should probably give it a 2-star, but I don't know, Grease has a soft spot in my heart. Oh, Grim Tendrils is such an overly cool spell for level 1. It's arcane and occult traditions, a 30-foot line in front of you. Any creatures in that line must make a fortitude save. On a crit success, they're completely unaffected. On a success, they still take half of the 2d4 negative damage dealt through this. This spell is so cool. It describes it verbatim as tendrils of darkness curl out from your fingertips and race through the air. You deal 2d4 negative damage and 1 persistent bleed damage to living creatures in the line. Note that it says living, so you can't use this on any undead. If they fail their fortitude save, they take the full 2d4 negative and 1 persistent bleed. And if they crit fail, they're taking double negative damage and double bleed. So it's effectively 4d4 negative damage and 2 persistent bleed damage every turn to everything in a 30-foot line. If your enemies are coming down a hallway, that is freaking powerful. Really good spell. You can heighten it every level up to just basically double the damage. If you cast it at 2nd level, it's going to be 4d4. 3rd level, 6d4. Pretty good spell. I like it. 4 out of 5 stars. I don't know why. Maybe I'm just in a good mood and I'm giving all these spells high ratings, but I really like these spells. Gust of Wind for the Arcane and Primal traditions is what the Pushing Gust focus spell should have been. They should have removed this from the normal spellcasters list and given this to the focus spell. This spell is so cool. So, similar to Grim Tendrils, but longer, you shoot this in a 60-foot line in front of you. And every target in that line makes a fortitude save. It's very similar to Pushing Gust. A lot shorter range, but if they crit succeed their fortitude save, nothing happens. If they succeed, they cannot move towards you against the wind, so no matter what they do, they can't make any headway towards your party this turn. If they fail, a normal failure on the fortitude save, they're knocked prone. That required a critical fail for Pushing Gust, the focus spell. Why? Why is this a normal failure here? And if they're flying, they are automatically suffering the critical fail effects. The critical failure on Pushing Gust was pushed 10 feet and knocked prone. The critical failure for Gust of Wind is pushed 30 feet, knocked prone, and 2d6 bludgeoning damage. Why isn't the bludgeoning damage on Pushing Gust? God, this spell puts that one to shame. I don't even think Gust of Wind is even that amazing of a spell. It's good, and the fact that it's a 60-foot line means it can affect a lot of people. But man, this is what Pushing Gust should have been. I'm gonna give this spell 4 stars because it affects such a long area. It has a lasting effect on people even if they succeed their save, and it has the potential to do a buttload of damage and knock a bunch of people prone. This is a great spell, and it makes me angry that the Pushing Gust focus spell is so bad! And that's it for this installment of the Pathfinder Spellbook. That is all of the first level spells, A through G, for all the different traditions. Next week we'll start with letter H and go however long I think will fit in one video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts on some of the spells. If you agreed with some of my thoughts, tell me why you agreed. If you completely disagree with some of my thoughts and think some of the spells I mentioned are garbage, please let me know. I would love to hear. But we had a good selection of spells this time. I think we only had 1 or 2 that were below a 3-star, so good stuff, Paizo. I'm liking these spells. I will see you guys soon for the Monk Guide. I believe it's a Monk Guide coming up tomorrow, so I'll see you there. And then I'll see you next week for another installment of the Pathfinder Spellbook. Until next time, no nat ones.